Imagine waking up tomorrow and an entire city is just gone.
Right.
Like millions of people, skyscrapers, roads, just vanished overnight. Or, imagine turning on your screen to find out some sudden unexplained wave has just swept across the globe and wiped out billions of lives in a matter of minutes.
It's a genuinely terrifying premise for sure.
It is. And according to one author, these aren't just like far-fetched plots for a sci-fi movie. They are the inevitable consequences of what humanity is currently doing to its own soul.
Yeah, and we are looking at a highly specific translated text for our deep dive today. It's titled "The Current Crises Faced by Humanity" by Shuifeng, and it was translated by Kong Long.
Right.
And this text suggests that the way we usually process the news, looking at the economic factors of one disaster or like the political drivers of another, is fundamentally flawed. We are entirely missing the underlying architecture of global collapse.
Totally. And before we really unpack that architecture, we need to lay down some crucial ground rules for our deep dive today. Because, as a curious learner, you're constantly bombarded with news about global crises. But this text weaves together some incredibly sweeping concepts.
Yeah.
I mean, touches on theology, deep philosophy, global politics.
Oh, yeah, it heavily critiques secular science, atheism, biological evolution.
Organized religion, too.
Yeah.
All while referencing things like the greatest creator, Buddhas, celestials, and multidimensional spaces.
Which means we need a very clear disclaimer right off the bat. Our job today isn't to endorse, validate, or take sides on any of these theological or political viewpoints. We are entirely impartial guides here.
Exactly. We're just the messengers.
Right. Our mission is simply to map out this author's fascinating worldview, examine the internal logic they're using, and just understand the deep psychological connections they are drawing between human belief systems and global disasters.
We are exploring the framework, plain and simple. And the author starts by, building out a very familiar picture of the world.
They do.
They categorize the problems we see around us into what they call superficial crises.
Yeah, superficial.
Like, these are the things dominating your daily feed right now. Water resource shortages, severe food deficits, explosive population growth.
And the list is extensive. I mean, the text points to air pollution, the rapid spread of strong viruses, the leakage of nuclear facilities.
Desertification.
Right, desertification, the alarming rate of endangered species, the greenhouse effect, ozone depletion, and the global competition to stockpile nuclear weapons.
It's basically the ultimate doomsday bingo card.
It really is.
But the author insists that, as terrifying as those things are, they are purely surface level. The text argues that enlightened people can see even more extreme, hidden crises looming just out of sight.
Right, and that's where those apocalyptic images come in, the sudden extinction of the human race, a religious virus sweeping society, or that terrifying beam of wave.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the author makes the case that the ordinary person cannot conceive of these looming threats because we are entirely fixated on the visible symptoms, right?
Exactly. We pour all our energy into mitigating the physical damage while completely ignoring the mechanism that's generating the damage in the first place.
It sounds like we are treating the Earth like a computer hardware problem.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
We keep trying to replace the fan to cool down the server. But the author is saying the problem is actually a corrupted line of code in the software itself.
Right.
The operating system, which in this framework is our soul, is broken. So it's forcing the hardware to overwork, overheat, and eventually catch fire.
That analogy perfectly captures the author's core thesis. I mean, the text literally states, the core crisis faced by humanity is the crisis of the soul.
Wow.
All the physical destruction, the dead oceans, the nuclear threats, the encroaching deserts, they are direct outputs of an internal spiritual collapse.
So if humanity only treats the hardware and ignores this corrupted software,
the author warns it will end in human extinction and the destruction of the earth.
Okay, well, let's define terms here. What does a crisis of the soul actually look like in this framework?
So the author makes a biological comparison. They note that humans have eyes, ears, a nose, a tongue, a body, and consciousness.
Right. We can hear, smell, and taste our physical environment perfectly fine.
Exactly. But the claim is that we are actively losing a crucial perceptive tool that they call our spiritual sense.
And losing that spiritual sense acts as the central mechanism for everything else that goes wrong.
Yeah, the author details a very specific list of blind spots that emerge. Without a spiritual sense, the text claims humans can no longer perceive the greatest creator or any gods, Buddhas, or celestials.
But it goes deeper into the metaphysical too, doesn't it?
It does. The author argues we lose the ability to feel the existence of 36-dimensional spaces, the negative universe, and a concept they refer to as horizontal time.
Okay, hold on. Let's pause there because we can't just gloss over those terms. Horizontal time.
Yeah.
I understand time moving forward, from the past into the future like a straight line.
Yeah.
But what exactly does horizontal time mean in the context of this philosophy?
So think of our normal perception of time, linear time, as walking down a narrow hallway.
Okay.
You can only see the step you are on, the steps behind you are gone, and the steps ahead are unknown.
Right.
Horizontal time, in esoteric frameworks like this, suggests time is actually a vast landscape. All moments, past, present, and future, exist simultaneously across different planes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Your soul is simply navigating across that landscape. If you lose the perception of horizontal time, you become trapped in the tiny, immediate moment, completely blind to the eternal ripple effects of your actions.
That helps immensely. And what about 36-dimensional spaces and the negative universe?
Right, so the multidimensional space concept suggests reality is like a towering skyscraper, but humanity is completely confined to the third floor. We assume our floor is the entire building, oblivious to the complex activity happening on the floors above and below us. And the negative universe is presented as the unseen, energetic, or spiritual counterweight to our physical, material universe.
Like antimatter balances matter.
Exactly like that.
So, without a spiritual sense, we are basically wandering around the third floor, thinking the hallway is all that exists, completely blind to the rest of the building.
Yeah, it's the idea.
And the text argues that because we are blind to all of this, humanity places ultimate trust in scientific findings. Atheism becomes the default. People reject the magic of consciousness or the idea of reincarnation.
And we become incredibly arrogant about our place in the universe. The author describes a humanity that has locked itself inside a purely material, physically observable reality.
Right. If a phenomenon cannot be touched, weighed, or measured with a scientific instrument, humanity collectively decides it does not exist.
Precisely.
Well, I have to play devil's advocate here. I can follow the logic that a purely materialistic society might become a bit cynical, but it's a huge jump to say that just because someone trusts the scientific method, they are automatically going to become a cutthroat survival of the fittest villain.
That's a fair point.
Like, how does a disbelief in horizontal time or reincarnation actually lead to something concrete and physically devastating, like air pollution or the stockpiling of biological weapons?
It really comes down to the timeline of a consequence. Think about how belief dictates long-term behavior.
Okay.
If you believe your soul will literally have to inhabit this earth 200 years from now in a future lifetime, pouring toxic waste into a river today means you are poisoning your own future drinking water.
Oh, I see. The cause and effect loop is closed.
Exactly. But if you believe, as the author puts it, that your thoughts are prisoned in three-dimensional space and death is the absolute final end of your existence, that moral calculus shifts entirely.
The environment just becomes raw material to be converted into cash before your time runs out.
Yeah. And the author synthesizes this into 8 points of fallen human nature. When you are locked in a box where death is the final buzzer, you lose any concept of the law of cause and effect across lifetimes.
You attach immense weight to immediate worldly wins and losses.
Right. People will use any means necessary to achieve their short-term goals because they believe there is no cosmic consequence waiting for them after they die.
It's like the ultimate cheat code mentality. If the game data is going to be wiped forever anyway, you might as well exploit every glitch to get the high score today.
That's a great way to put it. And that mentality is amplified heavily by point number 5 in the author's framework.
Which is?
When humanity loses its spiritual sense, it doesn't just abandon theology. It actively replaces it with biological theories, specifically Darwinian evolution, the law of the jungle, and survival of the fittest. And then it applies those biological concepts directly to human social structures.
So we take a theory meant to explain the beak shapes of finches and use it to justify crushing our neighbors in the corporate world.
Yes, exactly.
Instead of seeing other humans as fellow souls sharing a skyscraper, we view them as biological competitors in a zero-sum game of survival.
And when you combine that survival of the fittest mindset with a total disregard for long-term spiritual consequences, the author argues the results are physically catastrophic.
This is the mechanism.
This is the exact mechanism that leads to our relentless, frantic development of heavy, environment-damaging industries. It justifies the predatory exploitation of natural resources and the creation of nuclear weapons.
Because everyone is treated as a potential rival or an enemy to be conquered, all in the pursuit of temporary fame, wealth, and power.
Exactly. We've built a global society based on it.
Which brings us to the inevitable collapse of societal morals. And the author doesn't just theorize about this decay. They paint a really vivid, disturbing picture of what it looks like on the ground.
They do.
They actually pull extensive quotes from an ancient Chinese book called The Tractate of the Most High One on Actions and Consequences.
The crimes detailed in that ancient text are startlingly specific, and yet they feel entirely recognizable in our modern era.
They really do.
Yeah.
The text describes people who defraud the ignorant and naive, who employ espionage, plots, and entrapment to get ahead.
It's wild.
It talks about those who slay captives or who oppress the people below them while shamelessly cringing before those above them to win favor. It lists incredibly specific betrayals, like wronging orphans, coercing widows, receiving bribes, stealing people's harvests, and my personal favorite phrasing, taking the straight as crooked and the crooked as straight.
I love that phrase. It perfectly captures the essence of modern gaslighting, doesn't it?
Completely.
It describes a society where twisting reality to serve your own selfish ends becomes a standard operating procedure.
Yeah.
And the author uses these dark examples to create a sharp contrast with their vision of what a truly moral, spiritual person looks like.
And the contrast is night and day. The spiritual person, according to the text, reveres the greatest creator and maintains an acute awareness of their own weakness and insignificance.
Right, which acts as a permanent shield against arrogance. This person reveres Mother Nature in highly practical ways. The author outlines specific behaviors like a spiritual person will never dump wastewater from factories or hospitals into rivers. They refuse to hunt or eat wild animal meat. They will never manufacture or sell fake, shoddy goods to make a quick buck.
It extends into intellectual property and social harmony as well. The text states a spiritual person will never steal another person's research findings to gain unearned fame. And they will never suppress new ideas, new cultures, or new values out of fear or competition.
The mechanism behind this stark difference in behavior comes down to one missing ingredient in the secular world, and that's gratitude.
Oh, yes.
The author builds out several powerful metaphors to explain how a spiritual sense naturally generates a foundation of gratitude and contribution.
Let's dive into those metaphors because they are fantastic. The author points out that in nature, there is a constant balanced exchange of energy. If you water and fertilize a plant, it expresses gratitude by bearing fruit. If you feed a chicken, it produces eggs. If you care for a dog, it guards your home. Giving naturally results in contributing back to the ecosystem.
But the human who has lost their spiritual sense breaks that natural cycle entirely. The text describes them using two incredibly bleak descriptors.
Oh boy.
First, as a black hole, an entity with massive gravitational pull that only absorbs energy, demands resources from everyone around it, and never lets a single ounce of light or contribution escape back out.
That is so evocative.
Yeah.
And second, as a virus, an organism that doesn't build or sustain, but solely exists to replicate itself and destroy its surrounding host environment.
Yeah. So if the secular world is this toxic, self-consuming black hole, a scramble of people acting like viruses, human nature dictates we would eventually look for a lifeboat.
Naturally, we'd want to escape the collapse.
Right. And historically, the traditional lifeboat for a crisis of the soul has been organized religion. So you have to ask, does this text view massive religious institutions as the way out?
That is the exact logical leap I made while reading, because the author even sets the stage for it by asking us to take a 1,000-meter view of the Earth.
Yeah, the helicopter view.
Exactly. Imagine hovering in a helicopter, looking down at our major cities. From that height, the author says humans look exactly like a group of ants on a hot pot, running around in pure, directionless panic.
And if you could stop one of those ants and ask them where they're rushing to in such a frenzy, their only answer would be that they are searching for food, a drink, and a safe place to live.
Just basic survival.
Yeah, they swarm toward a drop of oil or a dead insect simply because that's where the rest of the swarm is heading. It is a purely reactive, instinct-driven existence. The author dismisses the secular world as nothing more than an animal world.
And when a few individuals realize this, When they wake up and realize they're just ants burning their feet on a hot pot, they desperately try to stand out and find an escape route. The text notes that these seekers usually turn to religions. The author even concedes that a genuine disciple of any religion is spiritually superior to the greatest king or billionaire in the secular world.
Right, because the religious person is awake to a spiritual direction while the secular world is sleeping.
So the setup points entirely toward religion being the ultimate cure. But in a massive twist, the text delivers a brutal, systemic critique of modern organized religion instead.
It completely flips the script.
It really does.
The author argues that as human wisdom and scientific understanding have expanded over time, the people operating within these ancient religious institutions have become deeply internally confused.
Right.
They have lost their connection to true spiritual liberation. Instead of finding clarity, the author compares modern religious disciples to gamblers.
Gamblers who are sitting at the table, stubbornly doubling down on a terrible hand.
Exactly. They have staked their entire identity, their energy, their time, and their intellect on their specific religious institution. Deep down, they might begin to sense that the institution is flawed or that it is disconnected from the ultimate truth they were seeking. But instead of walking away and cutting their losses, they just keep gambling. They need the institution to be right to justify the investment they've already made.
And to make themselves feel better about their poor choices, they actively try to recruit others to sit at the table and gamble with them.
Yeah.
The author illustrates this psychological trap using a brilliant, somewhat heartbreaking fable about a tailless fox.
Oh, the fable is incredibly effective. It tells the story of a fox traversing a frozen landscape who accidentally gets its tail frozen solid in the ice.
Oh, no.
To escape and survive, the fox has to tear its own tail off. Now, this fox is tailless, feels embarrassed, isolated, and the other foxes are mocking it. But instead of admitting it made a mistake on the ice, the fox decides to cope by launching a massive public relations campaign.
Right. It struts around the forest, trying to convince all the other foxes that being tailless is actually a higher state of evolution. It argues that a missing tail is the most beautiful, enlightened way to exist, and that all the other foxes are fools if they don't immediately hack off their own tails to join the club.
It is a devastating metaphor for institutional rationalization, and the author uses this fable to warn the reader about the danger of the illusion of the crowd.
Which is?
Well, we are deeply susceptible to assuming that scale equals truth. We look at a giant, powerful religious organization or a massive social movement and assume there must be fundamental truth there. We think millions of people wouldn't dedicate their lives to this if it didn't hold the secret to genuine happiness.
We do the same thing with powerful individuals, too. We look at celebrities, intellectuals, or wealthy figures and assume that whatever path they are walking must be the correct one.
Right.
We think these smart, successful people would never blindly follow a tailless fox.
But the author shatters that assumption entirely. The text observes that when people are outside these massive organizations, they feel the heat of the ant farm and desperately want to get inside the walls for safety.
But once they actually get inside, they find nothing but bewilderment. They realize they were just blindly following a crowd, wearing heavy shackles that they willingly locked onto their own wrists.
Which brings us to the haunting conclusion of this entire philosophical framework. The text points out that once these seekers are trapped inside these massive, confusing structures, having escaped the ant farm only to become a tailless fox, the only action left to them is to wait.
Yeah.
They sit in their shackles and hope, using what the author calls a fluke mind.
A fluke mind. It describes a state of spiritual passivity, just hoping for a lucky break, hoping that maybe, against all internal intuition, the crowd is actually right and the institution will somehow save them in the end.
It's tragic, really.
It is. But exploring a framework like this is incredibly validating for anyone trying to make sense of our chaotic world. And we spend so much energy analyzing the surface-level data, the policies, the economic charts, the carbon emission targets. But whether or not you buy into this author's specific theology about 36-dimensional spaces or the greatest creator, the underlying psychological diagnosis is profound.
I agree. The idea that adopting a hyper-competitive, survival-of-the-fittest worldview doesn't just damage the physical environment, it actively strips away our capacity for gratitude.
Exactly.
It transforms human society into a short-sighted black hole that only knows how to consume, completely forgetting how to contribute back to the ecosystem.
The text leaves us with a lingering, powerful question. The author looks at all the millions of people waiting in their self-imposed shackles with a fluke mind and simply asks, what are they hoping for?
It forces a brutal self-reflection. If the secular hustle is just ants scrambling on a hot pot and joining massive organized crowds just turns you into a tailless fox shackled to an illusion, you have to ask yourself what a truly independent path looks like today. And, it leaves you with something entirely new to consider about our modern technology. If massive institutions are just illusions of the crowd, are the algorithms that curate our daily feeds actually our modern shackles?
Oh, wow.
In our hyper-connected world, are we unwittingly outsourcing our spiritual sense to a silicon chip, sitting passively with a fluke mind waiting for an algorithm to tell us what to value, fear, or desire next?
Are we letting this software corrupt our own internal code? That's a huge thought. So the next time you open up that feed and feel that overwhelming wave of crisis wash over you, take a moment to ask yourself what layer of the problem you are actually looking at.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will catch you next time.